Hey everyone, welcome to the Optispan podcast. On today's episode, we're going to talk about my favorite white powder, creatine. And so, one of the questions we're going to think about is creatine the most overrated health supplement in 2025? I personally wouldn't go that far, but I definitely think health influencers have jumped all over the creatine bandwagon recently, making claims like it feels like speed, just as good as caffeine, even that it might reverse aging. And so today we're going to talk about the truth without hopefully the marketing spin, so you can save your money and maybe your gut before you jump on the influencer bandwagon. I'm Matt Kaberlein. This is Nick Arapis. I've been studying longevity for over 2 decades, and my only goal here really is to help people live a longer and healthier life with proven science, not with marketing pseudoscience. So in just a few minutes, we're going to react to a few videos with popular health gurus, hear what they're saying about creatine. We'll break down what maybe they're getting wrong, where the science shows otherwise, and we'll give you some suggestions for what you can do instead. So let's separate the real data and facts from everything else and finally get to the truth about what creatine actually does.
Great. I thought maybe we could set the stage a bit and kind of give a high level view of what we're going to talk about today.
Sure. Sounds good. So I think let's start with maybe an overarching reality check. There's no doubt creatine has good evidence for improving body composition, but really that's when it is combined with resistance training. Beyond that, I'd say there's definitely some intriguing early evidence for potentially maintaining short-term cognitive function, particularly under conditions of stress, maybe sleep deprivation. These effects are generally pretty modest, and I think probably not substantial in normal, healthy people. Again, maybe under conditions of stress or sleep deprivation. I think one of the problems here is that the supplement influencers, for lack of a better way of saying it, have turned every kind of minor benefit into, outrageous claims about earth-shattering effects, cellular superpowers, brain optimization, stuff like that. I also think it's interesting that recently there has been, it seems like, a popularization of the idea that people should start megadosing creatine, right? We'll talk about what that means. But I think the take home is there's really little to no evidence that higher doses of creatine will give you anything over what a standard dose does. If you do it consistently, and consistency is probably the most important thing. So my sort of take home is creatine belongs in the top 5 supplement list. It's certainly in my top 5 supplement list. Not a lot of downside, at least at normal doses, which again, we'll talk about what that means. Might give you a slight edge. And I think if you do resistance training, which you should, for a lot of people, it will give you an added benefit, but it's not going to transform your life.
I thought it would be interesting to start with almost like our history with creatine. So like I started taking it in 2007, so I was 15 years old. So almost 20 years straight, 5 to 10 grams a day.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and I really didn't start taking creatine until probably 2020, 2021. Again, that's around the time when I really started to pay more attention to particularly my resistance training regimen. And I've taken it more or less consistently since then, 5 grams a day. I took, I don't know, probably 6 months off. No real reason. I guess I just sort of stopped taking it. Didn't really notice anything either way. But really, for the most part, for the last at least 3 to 4 years, have been taking 5 grams of creatine a day pretty consistently.
Did you notice a weight increase when you started it?
Not really. Okay. I can't say that I really. Again, I don't weigh myself every day, so I don't know that I would have. But I haven't really noticed an impact one way or the other. I mean, but a lot of people do report, a little bit of added water weight when you first start taking it. Obviously, that's not muscle that gets built right away. But over time, the data are pretty good that people taking 5 grams a day, also doing resistance training, tend to add a little bit more muscle than people who don't take creatine and do resistance training.
Okay. So the team, like you mentioned, the team put together about, I think, 4 different videos for you from a variety of health influencers to get your kind of reaction on.
Yeah. And I mean, again, I think, it's useful to talk about some of the things that people can do when they're sort of evaluating claims made on the internet, and particularly, YouTube personalities. I think kind of the way I think about this is first, what is the person's expertise? Do they have credentials in the space? and or experience in the space that give them some reason to think that they know more about the topic than you do, right? And credentials aren't everything. Certainly there are people who maybe don't have, say, academic credentials in a field, but have done a lot of research, understand what they're talking about, and know as much as somebody who has a PhD. But by and large, if somebody has academic credentials, especially if they've done research in the space, then they're likely to have a better foundational base of knowledge from which to provide quality information. So credentials and experience, I think, are something to look at. And then I think track record of credibility, right? And I think ask yourself, is what they're saying reasonable? And are they saying it in a measured way? Are they hyping it? That's one way to think about credibility. Another is, are they known to have been dishonest in the past? Because if they've been dishonest in the past, they're probably going to be dishonest in the future. And honestly, for me, that's how I really think about, a lot of the people who are quote unquote influencers in the space. If this person has a track record of saying things that aren't true, I am not going to listen to them, and I'm not going to believe them because they're going to say things that aren't true in the future.
If they are selling the product they're talking about, does that change your perception?
Yeah, I mean, I think you should be aware of it, right? I think everybody to some extent is selling something. Maybe it's an actual product, like buy my product. Maybe it's, contribute to my YouTube channel. Maybe it's just, trying to build their own personal brand. I think everybody's doing this for different reasons, but, at the end of the day, you need to be aware if somebody is selling you a product that could influence their view of the product and the way they present it to you for sure.
Okay, great. All right. So the first one up is Paul Saladino. So he's an MD with a residency in psychiatry. He's been kind of the main figurehead of the carnivore movement the past 5 or so years, and he's kind of been blowing up online recently.
Yeah, and I mean, again, I'd say when you think about the background of credibility and experience, he's got an MD, or medical training, may or may not see patients, but should have some background knowledge of physiology. And on the other hand, if he's a hardcore proponent of the carnivore diet, I'm going to look at that and say, well, that's not particularly evidence-based. Doesn't mean it can't be, a reasonable solution for a minority of people. But certainly it's not evidence-based that a carnivore diet at a population level is a healthy diet, right? And I would argue it's probably not the optimal diet for anyone. So if he's a big proponent of that, I'm immediately going to say this guy's probably not very credible. I know it's going to upset some people, but that's the way I think about it.
Yeah. I would say he's shifted where he's more animal based, or the diet's evolved over time where he used to be very strict.
I mean, my view is, I don't think there has ever been a case in human history where an extreme approach to nutrition has been successful in the long run.
Yep. Well said. All right, you ready to watch the first video?
How much creatine should you take a day? You're probably not taking enough. Check this out. 5 grams per day. Boom. That dose has been studied for muscle performance. After about 3 weeks, 5 grams a day of creatine will saturate your muscles and result in improved muscle performance, explosivity, strength gains, and better recovery. But wait, there's more. Higher doses of creatine than 5 grams a day are also beneficial. 10 grams of creatine per day has been studied for bone loss. And doses of 8 to 10 grams of creatine per day have been shown to slow bone loss and bone resorption, especially if there is some degree of resistance training. But wait, there's more. Even bigger doses of creatine than that might also be helpful. 20 grams of creatine per day have been studied for mental performance. It's hard to get creatine across the blood-brain barrier into the brain. So bigger doses of creatine, like 20 grams a day, have been studied and found to be beneficial from a mental health, mental clarity, focus, and memory perspective when taken for up to 1 week in situations that are stressful, sleep deprivation, etc. There's actually evidence that 20 grams of creatine could help your brain and your muscles and your bones. So creatine, incredibly beneficial for humans, safe, does not cause hair loss, not going to damage your kidneys, very affordable supplement, and you're probably not taking enough. Send this to somebody you know who takes creatine and might benefit from bigger doses.
A couple things to say. First of all, I didn't know that is creatine supposed to cause hair loss? I hadn't actually.
There's one study that's been heavily debunked.
Okay.
So no, it does not.
Yeah. So outside of that, I mean, it's interesting to listen to the words that he says. This is a common thing you see, I think, where the actual words, for the most part, a little bit at the end, he said some things that aren't quite accurate. But for the most part, if you just think about the words that were said, technically it's accurate, but they're said in a way that is very deceptive. That's meant to lead you to believe something that is maybe not supported by the data.
How much creatine should you take a day? You're probably not taking enough.
Okay.
Check this out.
So number one, you're probably not taking enough. He does this a lot where he doesn't say you're not taking enough, but the implication is you're not taking enough, right? So these are the kind of language tricks I think that people want to pay attention to. Okay.
Out. 5 grams per day. Boom. That dose has been studied for muscle.
So he's going to say this a lot. Has been studied. Okay. That means nothing. There's a lot of stuff that's been studied. Did you know that there was a study? This is so funny. There was a study looking at whether or not, when dogs defecate, they line up with the magnetic poles. So people study a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
So the conclusion would be when you're going number 2, face towards magnetic north and you'll live longer. That's like the implication.
Yeah,
like,
you could say it has been
studied for this. There's a bunch of stuff that's been studied. That does not mean anything at all. Okay.
Performance. After about 3 weeks, 5 grams a day of creatine will saturate your muscles and result in improved muscle performance, explosivity, strength gains, and better recovery. But wait, there's more.
So, I mean, this is pretty true in the sense that there are many studies that have looked at combining creatine with resistance training, and there are sort of incremental benefits. It's not game changing. So I would say this is relatively accurate. It's certainly not the case that everybody is going to see significant improvements in muscle function, which is basically what he's saying, explosivity, strength. The data doesn't really say that. Certainly not for everyone. But if you combine 5 grams a day of creatine with resistance training, on average, people see incremental improvements in muscle mass and strength. So overstating the data, but directionally correct.
More higher doses of creatine than 5 grams a day are also beneficial. 10 grams of creatine per day has been studied for bone loss.
Been studied.
And doses of 8 to 10 grams of creatine per day have been shown to slow bone loss and bone resorption, especially if there is some degree of resistance training. But wait, there's more.
So he flashed a paper up there, right? It was published in Nutrients by, it goes by the title Creatine in Health and Disease. And so I went and looked at the paper because he probably didn't expect anybody to do that. But, you know, if you're going to put a paper up there, some people might go look it up. And so it turns out that this is a kind of meta-analysis, right? A systematic review where you look at the literature in a field. So it looks at a bunch of studies of creatine. It's not a primary paper on bone density. It actually talks about a lot of studies outside of bone density, but I could find in this that they cover 3 studies that looked at bone density and creatine. Turns out none of them are at 8 grams a day, which is the amount he's touting here, or 10 grams a day. One was 5 grams a day in postmenopausal women. That did have a positive effect on bone density with resistance training. 5 grams a day is a standard dose. Another was weight-based, 0.1 grams per kilogram per day. So it's going to vary depending on how much the person weighs. Also had a positive effect on bone density with resistance training. So that part's true. And then there was a study at 3 grams a day that had no effect without resistance training. So again, nowhere that I could find in the paper that he put up was it even hinted that 10 grams a day or 8 grams a day is better than 5 grams a day. No direct comparison. So again, what he actually said isn't explicitly untrue, but the implication was 10 grams a day has been shown to be better for bone density than 5 grams a day. And I don't think that's true. And 5 grams a day with resistance training, which is for many people going to improve muscle mass, also may have a beneficial effect on bone density. So that's the truth here. And so it's just presented in a very misleading way.
Great. Can we go back to the video, or is there anything else?
Yep.
Okay, great.
More, even bigger doses of creatine than that might also be helpful. 20 grams of creatine per day have been studied for mental performance.
Studied again.
It's hard to get creatine across the blood-brain barrier into the brain.
There
so
for a
bigger
second.
doses of creatine.
I mean, that's kind of true. So again, this is a little bit in the weeds, and I'm not sure where he got what he just said from, but it turns out that there is a receptor to bring creatine across the blood-brain barrier. It also turns out your brain synthesizes creatine. So that's one of the tissues in the body that actually makes its own creatine. So it's kind of a side point, but also I don't know that there's much evidence that creatine struggles to get across the blood-brain barrier, or that that's a problem because your brain can make its own creatine.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
also be helpful. 20 grams of creatine per day have been studied for mental performance. It's hard to get creatine across the blood-brain barrier into the brain. So bigger doses of creatine, like...
Okay. Yeah. So again, let's go ahead and look at the actual paper that he flashed up there. So the paper, Creatine Supplementation and Cognitive Performance in Elderly Individuals. There have actually been a few studies of creatine on cognitive function. And so what this study did not show, and again, the implication he's making is that 20 grams per day is better than 5 grams per day. What this study did not show is that 20 grams per day is better than 5 grams per day for any aspect of cognitive function. It did test 20 grams per day for 7 days. Now, why is that relevant? That's the typical loading dose that even people who are using creatine for muscle building will sometimes use to fill up the creatine stores. So that's kind of common, at least it's my understanding in the fitness world, is that if somebody has never used creatine before, you might start with a week at 10 or 20 grams per day, and then you go to 5 grams per day because you kind of maximize the stores and then you do the maintenance dose. Again, not any evidence that's better than just starting at 5 grams a day and staying there. If you look at the literature, they're the same, but it's fairly common. So that's why that study did that. There are other studies looking at 5 grams per day over a longer period of time that also show comparable, at least directional magnitude effects on different aspects of cognitive function. So if you really look overall in the literature, there's probably no difference between 20 grams and 20 grams for 7 days or 5 grams a day for a longer period of time. And in fact, there's a different review, which he chose not to talk about. It's called Creatine Supplementation and Cognitive Performance in Elderly Individuals. And I'm just going to quote from the abstract. Overall, creatine supplementation improved measures of memory compared with placebo. This is across multiple studies. Subgroup analyses revealed a significant improvement in memory in older adults compared with their younger counterparts. So creatine worked better in older people compared to younger people, probably no effect in young, healthy people. Creatine dose, and this is the important part, creatine dose, duration of intervention, sex, or geographical origin did not influence the findings. So basically they're saying across this meta-analysis, dose didn't matter. So the whole idea that 20 is better than 5 is sort of nonsense when you look at and this isn't me saying this, this is the meta-analysis, when you look at the body of work in the literature. So it's kind of just, trying to hype something that's probably not real or supported by the data.
With the end goal being sell more creatine? Or am I being too jaded?
Well, I mean, I sort of think, and we'll maybe come back to this, this is more just influencer culture, right? It's just trying to get clicks. Let's talk in a loud voice and be really excited. And, we'll get more people to watch this and pass it on to your friends because it's really important, right? It's that sort of mentality of just trying to get, I think these people are desperate for attention. Because once you get there, you kind of got to maintain it by making stuff up, right?
And someone gets a lot of views with the video saying 20 grams a day, and then it just spreads to other channels.
Right. And again, this seems to be a big topic among the influencer crowd right now. And as far as I can tell, there's no new studies. Maybe I'm wrong. I'd love to be proven wrong. As far as I can tell, there's no new studies that have come out in the last few years to support any of this, right? So where's it coming from? I don't know.
Again, so I've been taking creatine around, selling it back in GNC for 20 years now. And the big thing that's different now is the brain aspect of the conversation,
but even these studies are from 3-4 years ago.
Yeah,
right. And many of them from the early 2000s. So it's not new data.
And then one thing I did want to add is I brought this up earlier, but I looked into it. He does own this company of the creatine he's talking about.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so yeah, there's a marketing angle too. Then maybe creatine's not that expensive, so I don't know. I mean, I guess if people are taking 4 times as much, you're going to make 4 times as much money. So yeah, that's another reason to be skeptical of this guy in particular.
I even remember being told back when I was selling creatine in 2010 that the whole dosing, what's it called? The dosing up front,
loading.
Yeah, the whole loading phase was just a marketing ploy to sell more, to get people to take
Could
more.
Could be. I mean, again, it's not implausible that loading would maximize your creatine stores faster. But I think what we've learned is that now enough studies have been done that show that, over 6 months, over a year, it doesn't matter if you do a loading phase first. It's the consistency over time that is what really matters.
Great. All right. So next up is Jeff Cavaliere. Have you heard of Jeff before?
The name sounds familiar, but I don't even know what he looks like. I guess, again, I would ask, what's his expertise? Does he have any track record or credentials in the space to back up what he's saying?
He's a physical therapist. So what's funny is my wife's a physical therapist. She's got a doctorate in physical therapy. Jeff's older, and back when he got it, you actually only needed a master's. They actually raised the bar a little bit. So he got a master's degree in physical therapy.
I mean, that's something, right? He's clearly got probably some education. I mean, obviously, you're going to have to take biology, physiology, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I would assume if he continues to be a physical therapist, some life experience. I mean, again, then we're talking about something like creatine, especially for muscle mass, right? If somebody's been a professional fitness trainer for 20 years, they've got some experience. If they've seen lots of people take creatine and benefit from it, I mean, I think that's informative as well. So
absolutely. I think he worked for the Mets a bit, and then now he has a really popular YouTube channel, Athlete X. And it seems like more recently he went on Atia's. He's on Diary of a CEO in this clip. So he's kind of doing the podcast rounds now. All right, here's the clip.
Creatine has become all the rage recently.
Yeah, that's all related to the neurological benefits that creatine is showing in terms of depression and degenerative neurological diseases, and its improvement in its ability to slow, prevent things like MS and Parkinson's, and by basically keeping the brain in a more favorable bioenergetic state, meaning being able to feed the neurons of the brain with the energy that seems to be lacking in some of these degenerative diseases. It's been shown to actually improve brain health and performance in sleep deprived and in high stress states. From a depression standpoint, it's being shown to be very effective, even when kind of paired up with traditional approaches to treating depression through pharmaceuticals. It's just got a lot of promise. And the good thing is that there's really no downside. I
mean, I think overall, it's not too bad. Like he didn't completely overhype it. He said it in a calm voice. There's some things he said that I would suggest probably aren't accurate in the literature. But let's look at what he said specifically and go through that. So he said creatine helps with depression and works well with antidepressants. So that's generally true in the sense that there have been limited studies done looking at creatine in depression. He made it sound like it's established, right? I think that's really the problem with a lot of the way this stuff outside of muscle gets presented. There are a few small studies. They aren't even all necessarily going in the same direction, but these people cherry pick what they want to believe. So what I would say is there's one study that's probably reasonably well done. It was a study of women with major depressive disorder. They got either creatine plus standard of care, which is a pharmaceutical medication, or the pharmaceutical medication alone. And there, the group that got creatine did better than the group that got the pharmaceutical medication alone. Only 8 women per group. So teeny tiny study, right? So it's promising, but I think most people would say this is a preliminary result. So he overstated it, but at least there's some evidence to support it. Is creatine going to be a general antidepressant that's going to work for everybody? Almost certainly not.
She also mentioned something about Parkinson's disease.
Yeah. So as far as I could tell, this is false. So again, maybe there are studies that he knows of that I'm not aware of, but I think the best study in this space was a large, what's called multi-center randomized clinical trial, meaning it was just done at multiple clinical sites, but 1,000 people or so. Took creatine for up to 5 years. This was Parkinson's disease. It was stopped for what is called futility because there was no benefit for creatine versus the placebo. So that's about as negative a result as you're going to get. So I'm not sure how you go from a 1,000-person randomized clinical trial that was stopped for futility because creatine didn't do anything to having benefits for Parkinson's disease.
That's a pretty big study too. So like if it actually worked on 1,000 people, that would be pretty strong.
Yeah, well, certainly compared to 8, right? Which is what we talked about for depression. I mean, I think there was some earlier again, kind of small clinical trial mouse work suggestive, but I think when it got to the point of a larger trial, just didn't show any effect.
It makes you wonder. Maybe you saw a headline that had said Parkinson's and it said creatine and then conclusion.
Yeah, again, it's hard for me to know. I often do wonder, and again, maybe I will admit, maybe I missed the definitive study that proves it works for Parkinson's disease. I don't think that's the case. So maybe he did look and didn't see this study, or I tend to think more often, though, these are just influencers talking at each other and just don't do the homework. That I don't know about in this case. I think more often than not, these are people who are too lazy to do their homework. They hear somebody else say it and they just parrot it.
Okay. The other claim I want to get your opinion on was he said creatine slows or prevents MS.
Yeah, again, I mean, here it's a little bit more mixed. I think there have been some hints that it may have some benefits for MS. There's data that's gone the other direction, says it doesn't. One study actually suggested that people with MS are resistant to creatine because I think the study looked at 20 grams per day, and for whatever reason, in this population of people with MS, they didn't actually increase muscle stores or strength of creatine. So at least for muscle function, in that study, 20 grams per day didn't do anything. Another study found no improvement in work or power, habitual fatigues unchanged. So another study didn't show any reduction in the scale that they use for fatigue severity. So again, maybe there are some studies where creatine seems to have some benefits in the context of MS. There are multiple studies where it didn't, and maybe even some evidence that, again, maybe having something to do with the biology of MS, people are going to be resistant to creatine. So as far as I know, there are no human studies showing significant benefits convincingly for MS from creatine. Again, maybe they exist. Maybe he wants to provide those sources in the future. I don't know. You said this guy was on a TIA's podcast?
He was. It was a roundtable with a couple of strength and conditioning specialists. I think it was 3 colleagues. Because you were on the first roundtable with geroscientist, and he's done more. He did a skincare one than he did a exercise physiology one. But
okay.
Yeah. So where do you think, I guess this is all coming from?
Well, I think with the multiple sclerosis, there was a review article a few years ago, and its title was Creatine and Multiple Sclerosis, where what they really did was they noted that there are changes in the brain in people with multiple sclerosis that are consistent with inadequacy of phosphocreatine. We haven't talked yet about the creatine system, but creatine in the body can get converted into something called phosphocreatine. That's actually the energy store. So I think the first guy made a comment about, creatine makes this favorable bioenergetic state, right? That's not actually technically true. It's the phosphocreatine that serves as a kind of an energy buffer. And so in people with MS, there were perturbations in phosphocreatine. So this paper speculated that creatine might be useful for multiple sclerosis. It doesn't seem like, at least the body of literature to date, has supported that.
Another claim he said, and I hear this one a lot, is that creatine helps with sleep deprivation or periods of being, high stress.
I mean, I think it's reasonable. It's a little bit speculative, particularly with sleep deprivation. There are studies, and we talked about this in the context of cognitive function in older adults, that creatine can, at least in the short term, improve cognitive performance tasks under conditions of stress or sleep deprivation. I think what we don't have is any real evidence that over the long term, creatine is going to be beneficial if you're chronically sleep deprived or chronically stressed. So these are usually short-term studies looking at specific cognitive tasks. And so it's reasonable that if you're in a high stress state, or if you're in a state where your brain is energetically perturbed, that having more creatine and therefore more phosphocreatine will serve as an energetic buffer. That's probably only going to work in the short term, though. So the idea that I think what we want to be careful of is propagating the idea that if you're chronically sleep deprived, just take creatine and it will all be okay, because that's not the answer. Don't be chronically sleep deprived is the answer. It might have a short-term boost if you are chronically sleep deprived, although I think even that's a pretty big extrapolation of what the current evidence suggests.
Yeah, I'm guessing it probably is nowhere close to the power level of caffeine or something else that would.
Well, I mean, again, I'm not suggesting caffeine's a good solution for sleep deprivation either. Caffeine, you will definitely feel. I don't think there's much evidence that most people, if they take creatine, are going to feel any difference in their cognitive performance or mood state. Yeah. In fact, I took 20 grams of creatine today in preparation for this episode. So Tammy got me up at 3:30 this morning for something that she needed to do. So I knew I was going to be sleep deprived. So I figured I'll take 20 grams of creatine. What do you guys think? Is it working? No, I mean, I haven't felt anything. So I took 10 grams with my workout this morning, and then another 10 grams in my handy dandy interventions testing program water bottle here. Although this doesn't have creatine in it because I drank all that already. So I can't say I felt anything, honestly.
And the last thing he said, which I kind of have a counter to, is there's no downside. I don't know if you have a thought on that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think in generally, anytime anybody says that, you should question their credibility. Yeah. Everything has a downside. There is nothing in this world that does not have a risk associated with it or a side effect. The side effects can be minimal. And I think in general with creatine, 5 grams per day, most people, minimal side effects, right? Some people get stomach upset, but I do think the risk of creatine, especially at this 5 gram per day dose, which well established, many people, many years, the risks are low. We would know about it if there were any significant risks. You are perturbing your metabolic state, so there are going to be risks. You are creating an environment in your gut that is going to affect your microbiome, right? We don't know whether that's a good effect or a bad effect, so there are risks. I think at 20 grams, more people tend to have water retention, stomach upset, diarrhea, right? Those are real things that a lot of people experience at 20 grams of creatine. So they're maybe not life-threatening, but they are real side effects. So again, really no downside, overstatement. And my general view is anybody who ever says that about any intervention, you need to question whether you want to listen to that person anymore. Because at best, they are oversimplifying. They either believe that and don't understand that everything has a risk, or they know it's not true and they're saying it anyways. Either of those is not a great situation.
Yeah. I was going to say the GI is the one that I could not do 20 grams, at least in one go, and not have GI problems.
Yeah.
But.
Yeah. And like I said, I mean, I'm totally speculating. I don't have any evidence that creatine perturbs the microbiome in a negative way. But if you take 20 grams of creatine and you have a lot more water in your gut, that changes the environment that your microbiome is in. It will have an effect on your microbiome. It will. I just don't know if it's going to be good, bad, or, net neutral.
This is something I heard on a podcast like forever ago I wanted to talk to you about. But I've heard someone say like he doesn't almost like the phrase side effect. He's like, you take something and there's just effects. Some of them you like, some of them you don't.
Well, that's the definition of a side effect. Well, let me actually clarify that. Yeah. A side effect technically is any effect that's different from the reason why you're doing that thing or taking that thing, right? So there is a reason why you are taking creatine. Maybe it's to build muscle. Right.
Okay. So there's a primary goal and everything.
And then anything outside of the side effect. You could have good side effects or unanticipated effects, right? In the medical realm, or when we're talking about clinical trials, side effect is almost always really what you mean is adverse event or adverse effect.
You don't want
a negative effect that that's not the reason why you're taking it.
Yeah. Because you hear stuff of like hair growth with minoxidil ended up being a side effect. Like the goal was blood pressure.
Right.
Or Cialis and erection.
Right.
So.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. An unanticipated effect. And that ended up in that case being the label indication that they got approval for.
I see. Yeah. All right. So I think next up is Rhonda Patrick.
Right. So, I mean, when we go back to the credibility question, I mean, Rhonda's got a PhD in biomedical sciences. She's got a research background. I generally feel like she's a pretty credible source, and at least in the influencer sphere. I personally, I watched her podcast for a while and then I stopped consuming her stuff a few years ago. But, I think in general, she's does a pretty good job of communicating.
Yeah. I'm curious why you stopped watching her stuff.
I mean, part of it is just because I know most of it. So, I'm busy enough. I don't have time to listen to stuff that I already know. Also, she had a couple of people on who are more like celebrities figures in the longevity space. And this particular duo were spreading a lot of misinformation, pseudoscience about longevity. That just rubbed me the wrong way. And she didn't push back. She let them go on. And I, so for me, when I see something like that, I'm kind of like, okay, I'm going to tune out. I don't need to listen to this and get frustrated.
Sorry. I wanted to make a joke of we should send a shirt to the first person who guess who the guests were. I think I remember you telling me a while back. But all right. So this one is, I guess there might be an ad. So 320. Here we go.
On days when I don't sleep well, so if I'm traveling, I'm jet lagged, I'm in like the other part of the country, and I have to give a talk at like 8 a.m., which is, 5 a.m. my biological time. In those sorts of scenarios, I actually take 15 to 20 grams. And it's amazing what it does to me.
No, it's like speed.
It's like without the speed. It's like speed without the speed. It's like caffeine without the caffeine. Where
can you abuse it?
I mean, I wouldn't take much more than that. So it's not like addictive. It doesn't, I don't feel like, I don't wake up in the morning.
Yes, but you know what is addictive? Being alert.
There we go. That was a clip.
Okay. So part of me feels like she's expressing her lived experience. So I don't know what she really experienced. I can tell you, having taken 20 grams of creatine this morning, it's not like speed. Oh, you guys think I'm on speed?
Yeah.
Maybe. No, it's not. Like I didn't feel any difference from it. Certainly not like caffeine. Definitely not like amphetamines. So, she's probably just exaggerating. She's on a popular interest TV show. So I'm gonna give her the benefit of the doubt, but I think we can say with confidence, many, many bodybuilders, fitness people have taken loading doses of 20 grams of creatine, and I have never heard it reported as being like speed or caffeine. So very, very unlikely that is the case. The question of sleep deprivation, we already talked about this. Again, I can't tell you what her lived experience is. Maybe she genuinely feels like it helps her with sleep deprivation. Maybe it's placebo effect. The data are, maybe there's something there. So it's possible. And, if people want to try taking 15 to 20 grams of creatine when they don't sleep well, probably not going to do any harm other than give you a stomach ache. I guess where I would land is, and the part of the reason why this is a little worrisome is, while she didn't say this, a lot of people are going to hear that and be like, oh, I'm going to drink 20 grams of creatine and then I can go out and party all weekend and, take 20 grams of creatine all the time. Like that's just a really, I think, unfortunate interpretation that is going to come from not necessarily Rhonda, but this whole sort of influencer, hyping of creatine, is that this is a hack to allow you to do unhealthy things. Right. And I think that's the wrong message.
I see. Maybe that's my bias, because I always view it as I'm going to optimize my sleep first, and then creatine, caffeine, that's all bonus stuff. Right. But I never think of it as these things will offset a bad decision I make. But I'm probably unique.
But I think a lot of people are going to respond, or probably already have responded to this megadosing creatine thing.
Yeah.
By viewing it as a hack to offset, other behaviors that are detrimental.
One more comment, which was not in the clip we showed, but she talked about how creatine might be important for brain aging.
Two things to say there. One, I'm not aware of any evidence at all that creatine modulates the biology of aging. It might, but there's no data that I'm aware of to support or suggest that. As we've already talked about, there are some early hints that creatine can boost at least certain aspects of cognitive function in older adults, probably particularly under conditions where they are cognitively stressed or sleep deprived. So if that's what she means by brain aging, I mean, it's very indirect, but that is the closest I can think of to support the idea that creatine may have positive effects on brain aging.
How would you even test whether creatine can affect brain aging?
There are a couple of ways you could approach this. One would be, if it's really affecting aging in general, right, we can do animal studies and test whether, for example, supplementing chow in mice with creatine extends lifespan and broadly improves health span metrics. You could look specifically at brain aging in that sort of same experimental context and ask, in aging animals treated with creatine or supplemented with creatine, do you see a delay in age-related cognitive decline? Or if you start with aged animals, do you see a long-term improvement in cognitive function, or at least preventing further decline? You could argue that the limited human studies are going that direction, but none of them have been long-term enough to really say, is that a short-term acute boost in cognitive performance? And by acute, I mean within the time frame that you're taking the creatine, days, right? Or does long-term supplementation with creatine have a long-lasting effect overall on brain aging? And then how would you measure brain aging? You'd want to look functionally. You'd want to look morphologically. So MRI maybe, or other ways of imaging the brain. You might even look at circulating biomarkers of, dementia markers or other metrics of metabolic health. So those would be the kinds of experiments you would think about doing in humans. And as far as I know, none of those have been done.
Okay. All right. Well, the last one, the most credentialed person, I think, is Dave Asprey.
I am very hesitant to comment on anything Dave Asprey.
Oh, how come?
I know Dave. Did you know? I was on his podcast a while ago. I visited him in his house. He's a nice guy. I like Dave a lot. Did I ever tell you the story about how he offered to let me use his penile shock therapy device?
No, use his.
Yeah.
So funny.
Yeah, I said no. I declined that offer, by the way.
Wow.
But I mean, I think, look, Dave is an entertainer. He likes to say a lot of things for effects. When I was on his podcast, he kept going after Peter Attia, trying to get me to say something negative about Peter. And I kept having to I don't think Peter actually said that. So he likes to, I think, stir up controversy. And so I definitely do not want to become the Dave Asprey fact checker.
Yeah.
Somebody else can have that job.
It's a full-time job, probably.
No, I didn't say that.
Yeah, I said it. Okay. All right. Here we are. Next clip. Dave Asprey.
Is that creatine might be the most powerful cognitive focus drug you could buy off a store shelf today, on par with things like coffee and nicotine even, which is another way of focusing, right? But creatine doesn't have any of those stimulatory effects. It has an energy effect.
So, I mean, again, that's an overstatement. Obviously, we already talked about it. Creatine does not have the same effect as caffeine, does not have the same effect as nicotine, does not have the same effect as speed, does not make you feel that way. So I do not know of any real data suggesting that creatine has effects on focus like any of those molecules do. Maybe there's data out there I'm not aware of. I don't think so. So that to me just seems like, again, saying something, but there's nothing there. And he did say may, right? So again, he said creatine may have this effect. Creatine may have all sorts of effects, but I don't think there's any evidence to support that. So I can tell you it does not make me feel like when I drink coffee. I don't do nicotine and I definitely don't do speed. So I can't comment on that, but I have a feel for what that does to other people. And I'm pretty sure creatine doesn't have that effect either.
I've never asked you your opinion on nicotine as a cognitive or performance enhancer.
I mean, again, it's kind of like creatine in a sense. I guess the question would be like, what are you trying to boost, right? I mean, can you get a short-term effect on focus? I think certainly some people can. Might nicotine have long-term benefits for cognitive function? Maybe. I mean, again, it's in that area of biology, right? Affecting neurotransmitters and brain function. It could have a long-term beneficial effect. There's some studies, suggestive. It might also have a long-term detrimental effect, right? So, and obviously the way you take nicotine is important. You should not smoke to get your nicotine, right? But I don't think there's solid evidence supporting the idea that that's going to have a long-term benefit for health. So my feeling would be, to the extent possible, like don't rely on chemicals to try to improve your focus, right? Get good sleep. I mean, even coffee, I don't drink coffee for the focus effect. I like coffee. I like the effect and it's a habit. And there's some, evidence that caffeine consumption is associated with health benefits and lower all-cause mortality. So that's also not why I drink coffee. It's just a nice, excuse. But yeah, I like the feeling of drinking coffee. I don't know. I mean, again, if people want to take low doses of nicotine and it makes them feel better and they're taking it in a form that doesn't have other adverse health consequences, that's probably okay. It's just not my thing. I think speed, obviously, we know there's long-term reasons why you probably shouldn't go down that path.
Yeah. Maybe we should do an episode on nicotine. I'd be curious. And my story, right? I tried it at work for performance enhancement effects.
I know
and
that
then
story.
It knocked me out and actually ruined productivity. So
right. And I mean, I think some people are sensitive. It's just like caffeine. Some people are super sensitive. Some people aren't.
Yeah, I'm very sensitive. So I stopped trying. Okay. So my take home is some of this is hype from influencers. Some of it is straight up bad information. So kind of like what's going on?
I don't know. I think it's a couple of things. I feel like these folks listen to each other, they go on each other's podcasts, and they just kind of parrot what the other person says. So it's interesting to wonder, how did this get started, right? This round of creatine hype. I don't know. I don't know who the first one was, but as we've already talked about, I don't think there was new data that has come out in the last couple of months. So I'm guessing it was just somebody, started it, and then they all just started mimicking each other. I do feel like there's some pressure on these people, especially people who aren't really contributing anything else, right? If their podcast or their YouTube channel is the only thing they do, they're not doing research, whatever, there's some pressure there to keep coming up with something new to maintain your relevance. And the reality is medicine, scientific research doesn't advance that fast. There isn't a new big breakthrough every week. So they kind of have to make stuff up. And so this is just the newest thing to talk about for a few weeks to get clicks. And then it's going to be on to the next thing. So my prediction is this creatine megadosing will die away in the next couple months. And you probably won't hear about it again for a few years.
Any prediction on what fad will come after that?
No idea. I mean, creatine is actually relatively tame compared to some other stuff. So,
Yeah. I think it'd be fun towards the end of the episode to kind of go into the science of, creatine phosphate. How does it work? How do you get energy from it?
Yeah. So I touched on this briefly, right? So creatine itself is not a high energy molecule. So most people are probably going to be familiar with ATP, right? That's the sort of energy currency of the cell. ATP is generated through metabolic reactions, many of which occur in the mitochondria. So people talk about mitochondria as the powerhouses of the cell. ATP is the energy currency, the electricity, the electrons, right? So creatine can be converted into something called creatine phosphate. And that is done by taking one of the phosphates off ATP. ATP stands for adenosine triphosphate, and it has 3 phosphate groups on it. You take one of those off, it becomes ADP, and you make creatine into creatine phosphate. Creatine phosphate then kind of serves as like a battery, a charged battery. You can think of it when your creatine phosphate stores are full. It's like your battery is charged in case your energy from the mitochondria isn't sufficient. You've got this backup battery. That's when all of your creatine phosphate is fully maximized. Okay. So in many times in people, especially vegetarians who don't get a lot of creatine, they don't have enough creatine to maximize their creatine phosphate store. So their backup battery is never fully charged, right? It's maybe 25% charged. So if you take creatine, you will create a situation where you've got more of the precursor for creatine phosphate so that you can charge your battery. Your mitochondria can charge the battery fully so that when you need it, you've got that backup battery charged and you can use it, right? It's a kind of a temporary thing. That's why, like, for muscle building, when you deplete your energy stores from a really hard workout, having more creatine phosphate around can help buffer that, right? And that's presumably why you're able to get better gains, because you've got a little bit of a backup battery. Maybe the same thing's true in the brain. When you're sleep deprived or stressed and your brain is working really hard. Maybe when you're taking a test, you're thinking really hard. I'm speculating, okay? You're going to use more ATP. Your mitochondria are going to be working harder. You might get to the point where your brain needs more energy than your mitochondria can generate. So you dip into the backup battery, the creatine phosphate. And then when you're not working so hard, if you have enough creatine around, you can recharge that battery. That's kind of the way, I think that's a reasonable way for people to think about it. So by taking creatine supplement, if you're not making enough yourself, you basically allow the backup battery to get fully charged, which is why I say these are really short-term effects. I don't know that supplementing with creatine is going to be helpful if you're chronically sleep deprived, right? Or if you are chronically over-exercising. I don't know that supplementing with creatine is going to be beneficial. So, but it can provide that kind of short-term energy buffer. That's the way the system basically works.
From a biochemical standpoint, is it correct to say it's closer to carbohydrate? Because you eat carbs, it becomes, ATP through the Krebs cycle, I believe.
Yeah, I wouldn't even go there. Again,
this is different.
Yeah, well, and again, you can make ATP from a variety of types of macromolecules. You can make a lot of ATP from fat. So yeah. I don't know that I would go into the carb, fat, protein world. I think it's just easier to think of creatine in some ways as the substrate for the backup battery. It's not even the energy source itself. It just creates a way for you to be able to fully charge the backup battery, because you need the creatine in order to charge the battery with creatine phosphate.
Yeah, I guess what I'm getting at is the main battery is the food you eat. So carbs, protein, fats.
So the way I would think about it is you've got your energy generation, right? You got your power plant, right? And as long as your energy demands aren't too much, just the power plant itself is fine. Or maybe I haven't thought about this analogy, so we'll see if this works. But, if you have solar panels on your house, right? You can store some of that solar charge in a backup battery. But as long as the sun's out, 100-degree day, you're going to make plenty of energy to support your entire house. But if it's a really rainy day, no sun, super thick clouds, you go to that backup battery. Having enough creatine allows you to fully charge the backup battery. You don't even use it if the sun's out. As long as your mitochondria are making enough energy that you don't need to dip into that store, you don't need to dip into that backup battery.
I see. I guess what I'm trying to get to is what is, in that analogy, the rainy day, what does that represent in physiology? Like potentially sleep deprived.
Again, looking at the best data around muscle function and muscle performance, when you work out hard enough, you deplete your energy stores, right? Again, I think everybody gets that. So having that little bit of buffer allows you to go a little bit further, right? Or maybe allows your muscles to repair a little bit faster, right? Which is probably why you get that kind of incremental gain. But you have to stress the system. This is why I think people don't see any benefit for body composition if they only take creatine and they don't do resistance training, because you don't stress the system hard enough to dip into the backup battery.
You just reminded me of actually when I used to sell creatine, my pitch, part of it was you do a weight that usually fail at 9 reps, creatine might you get to 10 reps. That additional rep is what helps with progressive overload hypertrophy.
And I don't know the literature well enough to know if that's true. That's kind of what I was asking before about does creatine actually boost exercise performance, or is it more response and repair, which is where muscle growth really happens, right? It could be both. I don't know the answer to that, but based on this backup battery analogy, it could also be both. And so people may have heard of this enzyme called creatine kinase. Mm-hmm. So creatine kinase is the protein, the enzyme that actually converts that reaction from ATP and creatine to ADP and creatine phosphate. So you can think of creatine kinase as being the enzyme that allows the battery to charge.
Okay. I guess my only question about dosage to you, which we can decide if we want to talk about, is just Nikki weighs 100 pounds, I weigh 200, but we're both recommended 5 grams. How much does body weight adjust?
I mean, it probably does. I guess so there are studies that have looked in women at 3 grams and see similar improvements in muscle function, muscle mass as men at 5 grams. And there are studies, we alluded to one earlier, that dose based on weight. So it probably does have an impact, body weight, but I think 5 grams a day is an easy, useful rule of thumb that's not going to be too much and probably not going to be too little if you do it consistently. So yeah, I mean, could it be the case that you might do really incrementally better at 6 grams a day than at 5 grams a day? Maybe, but 5 grams a day is probably close enough if you want a one-size-fits-all recommendation.
So wrapping up, I'm curious, what are your take-homes?
Yeah, I mean, again, I would say that there's plenty of evidence that taking 5 grams of creatine a day consistently will increase phosphocreatine stores. That provides energetic buffering capacity, particularly in muscles. It will also increase phosphocreatine stores in other tissues, including brain. That provides an energetic buffering capacity that can allow your sort of cellular system to function better under conditions of energetic stress. The most obvious being, resistance exercise, extreme exercise, but resistance exercise in particular. And the outcome is that clearly, I don't think there's any real question that creatine supplementation across the population on average can lead to incremental increases in muscle mass when combined with resistance training over resistance training alone. Is it going to be the case for everybody? Probably not. But on average, you will build more muscle if you do resistance training and take creatine than if you don't. And you might get better quality workouts. I don't know. I think the evidence on cognitive function is early but intriguing. And I tend to believe that there's a there, given the amount of data that exists, that at least over the short term, supplementation with creatine, kind of independent of dose between 5 and 20 grams, can have improvements in at least certain aspects of cognitive function under conditions of I'm just going to say brain energetic stress, sleep deprivation, other types of stress. Really no good evidence yet that creatine is beneficial for cognitive function outside of that realm, just like there's no good evidence that creatine is beneficial for body composition if you don't do resistance training. And then, are there likely to be some diseases where there is this energetic stress and creatine might be beneficial? It's possible. I think the reason why creatine is unlikely to be particularly effective for disease states is, as we've sort of discussed, it's useful when you need to dip into that backup battery. Most disease conditions don't have that where you're just dipping into the backup battery. It's like a chronic energy deprivation state. So I'm less enthusiastic about creatine for things like multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's disease. So I could be wrong, but that's my guess. So again, take home for most people, 5 grams a day, every day, consistently, plus resistance training makes sense. You might get a boost if you're sleep deprived. You might not. But there's really no good reason that I can see to go to 20 grams a day, and you might have problems at 20 grams a day. They could be small problems, like your stomach feels upset. There might be larger long-term problems with taking 20 grams a day. I think we just don't have large population data on people taking that dose for decades. I'm sure some people have, but I don't think we have that many people. So I don't see any good reason to deviate from 5 grams a day. But if you want to try 20 grams a day the next time you're up all night, see how you feel, go for it. Yeah. And I mean, I guess the last thing to say is, and we've sort of touched on this, but I think what people want to be wary of is thinking of creatine as a hack or a crutch, right? I've said it many times with respect to exercise. Creatine is only going to show benefits if you're doing resistance training. So focus on the foundation, eat, move, sleep, connect. If you want to add creatine on top of that, I do. Seems like a perfectly reasonable thing to do. 5 grams a day, I think makes sense. No real reason to take more than that.
I think some people wonder when's the best time to take it with food, without food, after a workout, before a workout.
I mean, it's a good question. I don't think there are any good studies showing one way or the other that you get more of a benefit taking it, first thing in the morning when you work out, right before you go to bed. I guess my pragmatic view would be whenever you can remember to take it. So what I do is I always fill up my water bottle, usually this interventions testing program water bottle, right before I work out. And so I put creatine in it and I just drink it while I'm working out, but that works for me. So whenever you can remember to take it, I don't think it really matters. Because again, remember what we're trying to do here. We're trying to make sure you have enough creatine in your system that you can maximally fill your phosphocreatine stores. And so it doesn't, as long as you take 5 grams of creatine a day, you're going to be maintaining enough creatine in your system that you can fill the backup battery. And the backup battery will fill whenever there's enough excess ATP to allow you to fill up your backup battery. So it probably doesn't matter.
Okay. And on days you don't work out, do you still remember to take it randomly or?
It depends on the day. And I don't worry about if I miss a day. Again, thinking about how this is actually working, as long as you maintain your creatine stores high enough that you can maximally fill up your backup battery, it's not going to matter. So if you miss a day of taking creatine, your creatine stores are not going to drop enough that it's going to have a large impact on your ability to maintain phosphocreatine. So don't worry about it if you miss a day. Just try to be consistent.
All right, Matt, that was a big one. So thanks for your time today.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is, in some ways, I feel like we just spent whatever it was, 45 minutes talking about something that we could have talked about in 5 minutes, right? Which is 5 grams a day of creatine makes sense for most people. Make sure you also do resistance training. Focus on the foundations. I think, unfortunately, these influencers create hype where there's really no need for the hype. And so, hopefully this is informative to people, recognizing that, there's no real new information here, no real reason to get all excited, but this is a reasonable thing that should be part of your standard operating procedure.
Yeah, creatine was almost second compared to the real story, which is just the nature of the hype and how it happens and what's the next one.
Yeah. And again, I would suggest if your favorite influencer is hyping creatine, you might want to consider how credible that person is.
All right.
All right. So as always, guys, thanks for watching the Optispan podcast. I hope you enjoyed this one. If you're not yet a subscriber, make sure you hit that subscribe button and please leave your comments and questions below.